Right, we are live. Thank you for everyone for waiting. Super excited about this. We're going into a very spicy topic, wrapping up 2025 with a bang, and running 2026 with a head start. We have some of the most amazing panelists today. We have Jessica, Alex, and Mark, who've been CHROs in house, who've been fractional leaders, who've been advisors. And have worked in many different industries, startup and non-startup. So I'm super excited for this topic. Knowing this audience, we're going to have a lot of spicy takes. In terms of intro, Haris, founder and CEO of CandorIQ. We do compensation planning and headcount planning rolled into one. But Jessica, please kick us off with some intros.
Absolutely. So Jessica Winder, I'm the Chief People Officer at Winder Law Firm, which I now work with my husband. Neither here nor there. I also run my own career coaching company called Hidden Gem Career Coaching. And I'm an author and I do public speaking. So a little bit of everything. I'm excited to chat about this today.
Let's go around. Alex, would you do us the honors?
Sure, absolutely. Alex Seiler. I have been an in-house CPO and head of HR, now currently fractional, working with early stage and growth stage clients, have been in the people and culture space for over 20 years. And alongside Jessica, also do some other things, including speaking, advising for HR tech startups, including CandorIQ, and also some brand partnerships work. And excited to be here and talk on this spicy topic today as well.
Mark, round us out, please.
Yeah. So good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. I'm Mark Putrus. I'm the Chief People Officer for Nativo. It's a sub 150 person ad tech company. The best way to describe Nativo is if you go to a website and you get served an ad and you didn't even know it was an ad. Yep, that's it. It's that interruptive experience. So that's the world I live in. With an incredible crew. And prior to that, as a chief people officer in the ed tech space, what sort of makes me a bit unique is I actually didn't start in HR. I was a commercial operator and pivoted into HR and have never looked back. It's been one of the best decisions of my career. I also do some executive coaching and some advising on the side, and super excited to be here.
Amazing. So you all are in the midst of wrapping up 2025. It's benefits election season, closing out the quarter, closing out the year, and also figuring out what 2026 looks like. So it's definitely very, very, very busy. But maybe Mark, you can start us off. What's top of mind for you right now?
Yeah, there's really two things. Being an in-house operator, we're clearly, coming up on open enrollment, and that, process kicks off around July. And so we've been knee deep in it. I mean, I don't think it's any secret. Healthcare costs, especially in the US, have continued to rise at pretty alarming rates. And so we're just trying to grapple with how can we continue to support our employees in a meaningful way where we can either split costs or we can think differently about healthcare, because there's really, carriers are really sort of, especially in the post-COVID era, really sticking it to us. So that's been really top of mind for my team. The other thing that's also top of mind is AI. I don't think you can get into a webinar today, especially around HR, where somebody's not talking about AI. But for us, it's about sort of all the disparate systems, how they communicate with each other, how we garner all that institutional knowledge, how do we get AI not to hallucinate, because it is. So we're challenged with a lot of different things. There's so many use cases, but it's about really refining it down and ensuring that we just don't end up with complete system proliferation, because there are a number of AI tools and many of them are not speaking to each other. So figuring out which ones you want to use, how you get these things to communicate with each other, those are two things that have been really top of mind for my team.
Yeah, those are big topics. Alex, Jessica, what's top of mind for you both?
I mean, I'm happy to go first. Speaking on the, on the AI front, just to feed off of that, I mean, AI is meant to obviously create capacity for us, but I still think capacity is a huge problem, not just from a headcount perspective, but also from just an emotional and cognitive perspective too. I'm just seeing a lot of teams that are kind of running the same processes that were designed for different realities. And so they're trying to deliver on the same things they were doing a few years ago, but with fewer people and like twice as many requirements. So I think that's just proving to be a heavy burden and challenge. And then the other thing I would say is credibility preservation. So I think in the past, you saw a lot of leaders really saying, we're going to overpromise a bunch of culture initiatives and then execute layoffs after that. And so I think people are a lot more careful about what they're committing to. And so it's less about like, what are the new shiny programs and how can we be brilliant at the basics?
I second, third, everything. And then I just want to add, especially for the US, I feel like everyone's hair is on fire because of the state of the world. So if we're thinking like changes in, society, the shutdown in the government, and especially I work at a law firm. So all of these things are having an impact, not only on our employees, but on our clients. So then that impacts our bottom line. So all of these things are factoring in. And I don't think any HR person right now can keep up with all that's going on. So you tie all of that together in the state of being. And then to Alex's point, we're kind of like, do we promise this? Do we not? Do we know? You know what I mean? Like all of those things. And then we see what's going on in the news of every other big company is having a major layoff. So all of these people are also flooding the system when we have these open roles. So it's just on fire. I mean, if I could cuss and say a couple of words, I would.
Yeah, what I'll say is the labor numbers just came out for the month of October this morning, and it's the highest level of unemployment since 2003 on a month-to-month basis. So, so that definitely reasserts what you're saying, Jessica, and what you're feeling as well. So, what are some of the biggest fires, like tactically? Like, what are you feeling right now? And Mark, maybe if you want to go first.
Yeah, I mean, I just build off something that Jessica said. Like, I think, the overall sort of climate and temperature in the US in particular, and we shouldn't forget about our global colleagues. They're absolutely impacted with things that are going on outside the US. But, in the US, from a tactical perspective, most HR pros are getting bulletins around sort of changes to legislation. But I think it's an unprecedented time, because I can't remember a time in my career where we've had just so many stops and starts. So, this particular jurisdiction has this new thing we're building towards making sure that we're compliant. And then all of a sudden a court injunction comes and you got to pivot. And I just think it's the sort of the nature of what's going on in the US right now, where there's a lot of stops and starts. So you can imagine if you've got dedicated resources that are both strategic and tactical, and you're leaning in to ensure that you're in compliance, and then all of a sudden you've got to pivot. So that's, there's trade-offs and there's opportunity cost there. So I think that's one sort of reason for this, kind of cognitive overload and this dissonance that we're all feeling at work at the moment, especially in HR, because again, we're not trying to be everything to everybody, but there are some sort of table stake things that we have to always have in place. And this is just a part of that landscape where, I mean, it is the climate and that's what we're going to have to do. But it is certainly, it justifies a lot of what Jessica's saying around everyone is operating with their hair on fire.
Alex, what are some of the hair on fire problems that you're seeing?
I think, well, I'll start with a spicy one, because it's so not like me. So I would say, I think there's been a number of years of we've seen a lot of companies kind of grow at all costs, and then it's been followed by let's cut at all costs, right? So I think we're seeing more mutual distrust, and I would say particularly between HR and finance. I think that finance thinks HR is disconnected from what's happening within the business. And I think HR thinks finance is making decisions in spreadsheets without understanding the human impact. So I think a big part of 2026 is going to be, especially as this labor market, as we just talked about, is so much tighter, is building off that partnership again and really prioritizing what's urgent versus deprioritizing what's not.
Okay, spice. I love it.
I had a feeling Jessica might like that one.
I will build on that and say, I think that, to Mark's point about we keep thinking about AI, but also we think about the generations. So I think the different generations, when we think about the younger generation that's entering the workforce, and mind you, my niece is 22, and her thoughts on what she's going to do with her life and work, and what I was thinking at 22 are nowhere close to each other. Like I was like, I'm going to get a job, I'm going to be a VP, da 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 da, and she's like, I'm a chill. I'm on TikTok, So I also think that is something to this narrative of like the expectations of the workforce are shifting, and then people's expectations of HR and of leadership. And also I read something recently where most people don't want to actually go into leadership anymore. So what does that mean for our succession plans?
Yeah.
What does that mean for like how we're going to build the future workforce if people don't actually even want to be leaders? Like that's not the C-suite is not the expectation anymore. Like people are like, I don't want to do with that because they think it means something, or they've seen something that they didn't like. And so they're like, I opt out of that. I don't want to do that. I want to do my job, head down and leave. And leave at any cost. You know what I mean? They will leave with no job. They will leave and go live with their parents in a heartbeat. So that's something we got to think about when we're thinking about planning, because what does that mean when we can't get leadership anymore?
Yeah. I would also,
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to feed off Jessica's point. Also, the fact that I think the other thing I've been thinking of a lot is like, as demographics are constantly changing within an org or a company, you're constantly going to be evolving your people strategy because you need to make sure it's fit for purpose for the people that are there. And that could constantly change. And so to Jessica's point, like, the Gen Z demographic are more about like, the work life they want, whether work-life balance exists, they want more of that. And they don't believe in the hustle and grind culture that has been before us. So I think whether or not whatever you believe in, you've got to be conscious of what different people are thinking right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I want to build on that because Jessica, what you said and what Alex said is absolutely real. But the question I keep asking myself is, what have we done to make the leadership role seem so unattractive to a generation? Mm-hmm. We really have to ask ourselves that difficult question, because we're making it a very unattractive proposition. And tying back to mistrust in the workplace, what that's driving people to do is to have multiple income streams because they want to protect their economic interests. And so, we get frustrated. It's like, oh, they're not all in. Well, what have we given them? Yeah. Are there reasons for them to be all in? And so, look, I've never really believed that HR is the happiness police, but I do think we should give people a fair shot, right? Yeah. And we should give them something that they can lean into, and that, yes, there's an economic transaction here, right? We don't mean to be spicy about it, but there's an economic transaction, but are we holding up our end of the bargain? Right? Yeah. And giving people a fair shot at being able to reach their potential and their ambitions. And it feels as though, based on what we're hearing and what we're seeing, is we've made it very unattractive.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
So go ahead, Alex.
No, I was just going to say, and if you look at it from an outsider's perspective or somebody that's just joining the workforce, you can't really blame them, because what you're seeing, the things you see that your manager is doing is probably not exactly the fun, sexy work that they would want to sign up to do. You could be dealing with layoffs. You could be doing with budget cuts. There's no promotions or salary increases happening. Like it's a slew of stuff. And you think, why would I sign up for something like that, right? Where's the win for me as a leader, and where would the win be for the people that I'm actually meant to be managing and supporting?
Yeah, there's so many directions we could take this conversation. A lot of good topics. Maybe one is just tactically, like, so based off all the factors and all the things that are happening, how have you done, compensation and headcount management in 2025? Like, what's worked and what's not worked? Any tips and advice there?
I think for me, we've been super realistic. Like before, we would be very grandiose. So this is what we want to do, and this is what it could look like. And I'm like, cut all that. What is right now? What do we like? What roles do we have to fill next year? And it's very, way more realistic than like goal oriented, because I have had a previous CEO have me build out a model of like, this is what we would look like if we had 500 employees. At the time we had 200. And like 6 months later, we were doing layoffs. So I'm like, what? Like, this is like a bait and switch in itself. So thinking about like what is actually real is where I stand right now. Like, I think these future off plans of like, when we get to this, and this, is not where we are today. So we need to focus on present. So maybe this is me being woo-woo and talking about being present and like mindfulness, but that's where I'm at.
Yeah. I would also say, so I mentioned capacity earlier, and I think that feeds into this. And what you're talking about is like, I think planning fatigue is just like the toughest it's ever been. People are like planning, replanning, pivoting. They're like exhausted from all of that. And also, you know, I think that everything is happening at the same time versus certain things happened independently in the past. I also think because of how tight the labor market is, fewer companies are giving meaningful increases, and they know they can get away with that because they know that more, you know, the infamous job hugging is happening, right? And they've got not as many people are leaving. So I'm seeing more people doing more targeted adjustments or skipping cycles altogether. And I also think one of the biggest challenges we're seeing are the gaps at the manager level, right? I think some managers are crushing it, others are drowning, and like essentially the middle is just disappearing. So that's what I'm really seeing.
Yeah, I think all those are real. There's two things I would add to this is I think that for organizations that are doing quite a bit of hiring, I think, and those, you know, scaling companies, I think we have a real continued opportunity if we're flexible about remote work. That's a whole nother topic. I'm sort of over the return to office thing, but we can come back to that. But I think if we're open to distributed workforces where you don't have legal entities using EORs and getting into countries and tapping into that global talent, that is certainly a way to engage a broader pool of talent, and especially bringing diverse voices into the mix. From a compensation standpoint, you know, I think we are leaning into being far more fluid, and given the, you know, sort of economic conditions in the labor market, I think it gives us an opportunity to tap into the fractional market and the, you know, contingent workforce. I sort of refer to it as the liquid workforce, but sometimes by design. These are individuals, to Jessica's point that we were talking about earlier, where they have a different view on work. Like, well, why do we have to have such a traditional model that dates back to the Industrial Revolution? Let's start thinking about our compensation frameworks and how fluid they need to be to address the different types of workers in the workforce. Because ultimately, if I need to make sure I've got the right people in the right seats at the right time, then I need to adjust my model to fit what's in the market today. And the market is behaving much different. I see a lot of organizations still trying to deploy the old model or the outdated model. And to me, that's just trying to squeeze a, you know, square peg into a round hole. It just doesn't make sense.
Yeah. I would just build off of what Mark's saying, and also say like what I have seen and what I'm doing with certain clients is more in the way of scenario planning. So instead of trying to build one perfect plan, come up with some different scenarios with very clear trigger points, because then it reduces that sense of like scrambling, and it gives more people more confidence that you've sort of thought things through, and hopefully avoids a lot of the replanning, planning, pivoting that I was talking about before.
Yeah, and this is a soft pitch for CandorIQ, but having the real data. So like having the actual data that you need where you can map it out and see everyone in one spot, instead of like the hodgepodge that I personally have had to do several times in my career of like, you know, is it the real numbers, or are these real, you know, is it real data? So having a true system, that's the last thing I would say on that, because you need it.
Yeah, we got to get out of spreadsheets, and we've got to get into a place, especially when you're trying to be flexible. A platform like CandorIQ, where you can even use AI to do scenario planning that fast, right? I mean, we need to be able to do that because the markets do shift and the needs do shift, like essentially what I was talking about earlier around the liquid workforce and fractional talent. And so having that flexibility to be able to scenario plan very quickly. I mean, we used to be like in spreadsheets trying to do all this, right? Now we've got platforms like CandorIQ where we can do it so quickly.
And thank you for the shout out. So you have a tool that certainly helps, but I think one of the things that you all have called out is also, I think you need tighter collaboration with finance teams. Can we talk about that a little bit? I think that's really, really kind of critical. So Yeah.
So I'll mention it. It's something I can say that worked really well when I was in my last in-house CPO role. Was we used to do a sort of pre-mortem and post-mortem that was cross-functional, and also everyone put in their inputs about what they thought was working and what they thought wasn't working, and so it just built in more buy-in, and you got a better sense of like more perspectives and a bigger picture. And to your point, Haris, then it wasn't just about the tool. It's actually, you're getting a better sense of, hey, this is what worked this year. This is how we're going to build off of this for next year. And again, it's not about perfection. It's about progress. And so it's building blocks. And so that's what I found really useful. And I think needs to continue to happen in order to build those cross-functional partnerships.
Yeah, I've done the same. I will say throughout my career, I've had one CFO. He and I locked arms, stood in front of the train together, and we're like the best of friends. And when we met each other, we were both very resistant to each other. Like, oh Lord, here, I don't want to deal with this person. But we formed like a great partnership. Like it was a true, we're in this together. You are an expert at this. I'm an expert at this. I trust that you're going to do your part, and I'm not going to overstep. And you trust that I know the people side of it. And I feel like a lot of times that's kind of what is missing, like the trust that like you can do what you need to do, and I trust that you can do the other side. And that's something that needs to be worked on. Now, mind you, I have a very strong feeling about like HR reporting to finance, and that's a different topic. But I will say in this relationship where it worked for me, he came to my people meetings. I went to his finance meetings. Like there was true cross collaboration between our teams. Like our teams worked together. It wasn't just he and I. And that was the only way that I found that it works. If not, it absolutely becomes like an adversary, like, finance against HR against finance, and it never works. Like it's always going to blow up.
Yeah. And to Jessica's point, I've had similar relationships, and those have worked so well because of transparent trade-offs that we've had. I would always say, listen, I'm going to be looking to invest in certain things, but I'm also going to pull stuff out of the budget, right, as well. So they knew that I wasn't, it was a true partnership. I was thinking about cost savings, but I was also thinking about investments at the same time.
Yeah, I concur with all that. Like one of the things that's helped me in terms of the partnership with finance, and I'm very fortunate because the head of finance that I work with today, incredible. I'm fortunate because I got a chance to recruit him into the business, and so I feel so fortunate to have sort of had that sort of rapport, bringing Marcus in. If Marcus is on the call, hello. But like just starting out with some core principles around what's really important to the head of finance and what sort of is keeping them up at night, and understanding where you can add value and vice versa can be a really powerful way to start that relationship. Just starting at those core principles. And that helps us when we get to a position, into a scenario or a decision where we are struggling, we just go back to those principles that we started from the beginning. And that does help us oftentimes come to a collaborative decision, because most of the time, the goal here is not to escalate this to the CEO, right? The goal is for us to really resolve this as executives in the business. And almost always I can't even think of a time since he's joined where we haven't been able to resolve it. So getting those principles done up front is really helpful. And here's how you know it's working. Hey, I've got this challenge I could really use your help with. You've got a really solid relationship, and that's when oftentimes HR is asking finance, but when the finance leader has so much trust in the HR leader where they're coming to you and asking, hey, I've got this issue on the P&L, or I'm struggling with this OpEx issue, and I really could use your eyes on this, that's when you know the relationship is really blossoming.
Absolutely.
So as we switch over from 2025 to 2026, what is an HR trend or best practice that you want to leave behind? And maybe Jessica, I know you have lots of thoughts on this one. So,
oh yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on everything. There's so much that we need to leave. There's all these trends that we talk about, like the quiet quitting, and like I think Alex, you said something I'd never even heard of, like the job hugging or something. I'm like,
yeah, job hugging.
Yeah, I'm like, that one's new. We need to leave that too. I think we need to get back to employees are here, to Mark's point, like it is transactional, but you can still love your job. Like you are doing a job, you're getting paid, you're leaving work. I feel like right now we're in this like TikTok narrative of like, I'm going to videotape everything and like blast the employer. I really want us to leave that. Like, I really want us to be able to have an adult trusted conversation and not as HR be recorded and be blasted on the internet and TikTok. It is something that I have actually trained my team. If you are having a conversation with someone and it's difficult, you should just know that you're being recorded and act as such, because it is happening so much. And so I want us to leave that behind. I want us to be able to have adult conversations and not be recorded, not because you're doing something wrong, but just because why can't we just be human with each other? So if we could lead that TikTok trend in this year, I would love it.
Mark, do you want to go or me?
Yeah, I mean, all of that.
All of that. Just all of it.
Quiet quitting, job hugging, like all these unbossing, like all these terms, I think we just leave behind and just have real talk, right? How would we talk to each other if we were sitting at the kitchen counter having a meal together? Like, getting back to just human conversation and connection, right? You know, the other thing that sort of, I kind of, it's getting a little tired for me. This might be a bit of a spicy take because we're in the AI era, but, you know, the idea that, you know, we keep hearing this over and over again, you know, AI is not going to replace your job, but AI is going to replace the people who know how to use AI, that whole thing. Like, I mean, AI is probably more than a tool, and it certainly is going to give us more capacity, as Alex was talking about. But like, I'd just like to get more practical. I think there's just a lot of speculation and a lot of hype. And I think what I've really enjoyed about the interactions I've had with other people leaders is actually just, you know, breaking things apart, like peeling back the onion, getting to brass tacks, getting to the actual use case itself, experimentation. And I think just a lot of the clickbait isn't really helpful. I understand I'm in advertising. I understand why it's there, but I think we just need to get past that and get to the real sort of how can we create a lot of value and create a much healthier experience, as Jessica was saying, for our employees and, quite frankly, and our clients. Because when we do good by our employees, the client certainly has a better experience.
Yeah. I would add, okay, one of my biggest pet peeves at the moment is companies that keep treating every year like a crisis. Like, we've had 4 years of unprecedented times, okay? At this point, this is the precedent, okay? So, like, let's build for, like, change, not stability at this point, right? Like, that's something I'd like to see. Like, if I see the word unprecedented one more time, I'm like, I don't think so. We've talked about it before. The other thing that is also driving me nuts is we continue to talk about skills-based hiring, but we don't actually do it, right? So I would really like to see the conversation shift from, do you have this job title, to can you actually do this work, right? Because I feel like now we should be hiring for learning agility. I mean, talking to Mark's point about AI, that's just one of many things to come that we haven't encountered. So it's not going to be about what your resume looked like in the past. It's going to be how quickly can you learn new things in the future.
Yeah, I think those are good points. And maybe to kind of jump on the AI question, how do you all think that AI is shaping the type of people you're hiring or the work and ultimately the org structure? What do you think is going to evolve in 2026?
Yeah, for me, it's one of those things that I want to know that someone can change, they can shift, they can I need you to be able to pivot. So in fact, when I'm interviewing people, specifically, if I'm going to interview for someone to work for me in HR, I question, are you using AI and in what capacity? What have you seen? All of these things, because I want to know, even if you are not keen on it, oh, you think it's going to take jobs away. I want to know that you're using it in some way. I want to know what is taken off of your plate because of it and how can you use it to get better, period. And if I have been in interviews where someone says I'm not using it, immediately I'm like, ooh, are you open to change? And then I will question, well, are you open to it? How would you use it? All those things. So it's not an immediate out, but it is one of those things that I'm like, if you're not up on this now, I question, are you flexible enough to work to work with me, even just point blank.
Well, and to Jessica's point, I said this the other day, actually, like more and more companies are also interviewing for AI literacy. I know Zapier does it. I'm sure others are going to start doing it. So you're already edging yourself out against the competition if you're not upskilling yourself in these areas. So it's just a matter of time before that becomes the new normal, not the outlier. So I think it needs to happen. And the other thing I would say, and I would say the same thing, is like we talked about, like, AI is great for efficiency at scale, administration, reducing administration, all the things we know, but we can't lose sight of what it can do, which is it can't build relationships, it can't resolve conflict, it can't make nuanced judgment calls, it can't read what's unsaid in a room. Like, those things are not going away. So we need to double down on those human skills, especially when we're hiring.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting. I read this article several months ago about sort of the impact of AI in academics. And it told the story about how the professor is certainly encouraging his students to use AI. But what was the interesting twist on this is the assignment was basically argue with the AI, right? So tell me what it got right, what it got wrong, that kind of thing. So we don't lose our critical thinking. And I think you can apply that into the workforce, right? Because I think there's a lot of things that we're using AI to expedite, to create efficiencies, but how are we using our experience and a lot of the things that Alex just described and Jessica just described, which are human skills, to further and deepen the AI experience, right? And I think if we overestimate the impact, I think we'll lose some of those skills, which are really critical in the workforce, right? And so, a few people have said this, so I'm not going to take credit for it, but oftentimes with these types of inflection points in society, and you overestimate in the near term the impact and you underestimate the long-term impact. And I think we're probably in that. Like, I think there's a lot of hype. There's a lot of startups that are, AI-based companies that are probably not going to survive. But I think long-term it will have, sort of like any technological sort of evolution. I think you will see a tremendous impact. And I think it's a journey. So it doesn't to me, it's not necessarily just about speed, although that's an important, because from a skill set perspective, but it's also about the quality of the outcome.
Yeah. The other thing I would just add, like, I'm a big fan of predictive analytics, and I think they are great at showing patterns when it comes from a workforce planning perspective. But the thing I still get hung up on is they can't predict the unpredictable. So you've got to remember to use tools like that to inform decisions, not to make them. And so I think we also need to keep that, and that's the human piece and the judgment call side of it as well.
One of the things I talk to people leaders about is with all these AI tools, it's the HR team's responsibility in many degrees to kind of be the agent of change within the organization, right? Because you want to drive new skills, open up more mobility, align to KPIs. Yes, it's certainly like executive level conversation, but I think of it's, IT team will install the AI tool, but they're not measuring productivity. They're not measuring impact to the different teams and departments. And I see that like a new core, I think, KPI for HR teams. I don't know if that's my take, but do you all agree, disagree? How are you thinking about that with your organizations that you're consulting or working in?
Do y'all want me to jump in on this one? So that's an interesting question, Haris. So two things come to mind. I think it's certainly a collaborative relationship between the people function, HR function, and the IT function. I'd also broaden that because I think there's a lot of adoption of coding tools in the tech space. So it is much broader than the people function, but there are ways to measure it. So I'll give a real practical example. Like, as we have we've run an AI hackathon, so really focused in on AI tools. We've got AI Slack channels, a lot of best practices, a lot of sharing, a lot of prompt libraries. We have new sort of custom GPT. So we've gone all in. Like, I mean, we're not Zapier, we're smaller, but we certainly have adopted AI. And it's just one measure, right? There's many metrics, but there's one measure. When you have a leader who has gone all in with their team around AI, and we had an internal promotion. And of course, like any good business partner, we're going to ask about, okay, well, we've been talking about capabilities and building capabilities and maybe some new capabilities. Do we need to backfill that role? And the reaction was, no, due to how we've been executing as a team, I don't need to backfill that role. That brings tremendous value, because now it's not that we are not going to fill that role. We're just going to fill that role differently. Mm-hmm. And so now we've got capabilities that we may not have been able to tap into because we were financially constrained, but that financial constraint just lifted. And now strategic capability that we've been talking about in our workforce plan, we can get out into the market and get. To me, that's a very small example that if you were to then amplify that across an organization, could have tremendous impact.
Yeah, I want to say so I love that. And I think it's like a pendulum. So the opposite side of that pendulum is I have recently been working with a company who shall remain unnamed. They have taken the opposite stance on AI. They have literally banned AI from their employees and told them, do not log into ChatGPT, do not use any of these things. And what's happening, because I'm a consultant, so people are telling me the truth. And so I've met with the HR team and they're like, oh, we just do it on our phones and then send it to ourselves in Slack. So that's their workaround. So think about that for a second. Like, instead of using it as a tool to help you, the HR team is now secretly using it on their personal devices, sending it through their phone on their Slack to themselves in Slack, and then using that data instead of it being like something that is useful. And to your point of like using it as a use case and all those things, that's the opposite of what's happening. And I'm like, this literally makes no sense. So I want to say that, like, if you're listening to this and you're like people are going to use it no matter what. Okay. Genie's out of the box. They're using it. They're just going to find a way around you.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I don't even know if that's like a hot take, but it's almost a silly take. Like,
yeah, like silly.
Right.
Like, they're going to use it. Like, when they told me I couldn't, like, they gave me a laptop and they're like, yeah, you can't download these things. I was like, what? Like, yeah.
Interesting. So, and then as you're focusing on 2026, we talked about some of the things that we're going to leave behind, some of the things we're going to adopt. What's worked well, or what do you want to take forward into 2026? What's your guidance for our audience on things that have historically worked well or worked well the last 3 years that should be pulling forward as well when it comes to workforce planning, managing HR function, compensation planning, etc.
Alex, you go for this one.
I feel like I'm like, what is working well? I think that for me, one of the things I think what's working is setting aside like some of your time, however much you dedicate, for like 2026 and beyond work, even when it feels impossible. Because I feel like what I'm noticing is more and more people are leaving behind that sort of dedicated time on their calendar to think about that. And that includes what Jessica was mentioned earlier, like things around succession planning, leadership development, and infrastructure improvements. Because if you don't protect your time, it will never happen. And with demographics changing, we know that it's not a what if, it's just a when. So we're just pushing off the inevitable and not doing the hard work. So that's something I would say.
Yeah, I'm going to second what Mark already said about like the liquid, like being fluid in these types of jobs. That is working. Like, think about how you can fill these roles or get the right people there differently. Like, they don't have to be full-time. It's project work. It's this, it's that. So that is working. I don't want us, like I said, the pendulum always swings, and right now it feels like it's swinging back to everybody being in the office 5 days a week. And that's just not how it's going to work. No matter how hard you push it, no matter how many mandates. I've, gone on LinkedIn and said, like, when companies do that, that's basically like a layoff. Like, you're basically chicken. You're playing chicken with your employees. Like, are you going to get off or are you going to stay? And it's not really worth it. So I think being flexible and having fractional employees is working, and we need to continue that.
Yeah. And it doesn't need to be an either or. I always say this. It's very much an and.
Yes.
And I think also the way I look at it is also like from a headcount planning perspective, it's more about capability planning. Like, what do you need to build, borrow, or buy? Like, not everything is going to come in the form of a full-time resource, and it doesn't need to, depending on what the issue is that you're tackling as well.
Yeah, I agree. I have I want to answer that question, but I just want to build off of what Jessica and Alex just said, just to offer myself up. One of the biggest objections I hear from people is they're so fearful around misclassification, especially in states like California and the ABC test. Please reach out to me. You can look me up on LinkedIn, send me a DM. I will help you with this. It should not be a fear. There's absolutely a path. So if that is your fear and that's what's holding you back, you're missing out on a real strategic opportunity. And so, look, I'm not an attorney, but I've worked very closely with employment counsel. I absolutely know there's a path. And so don't let that stand in your way if you're getting pushback. To answer the question, Haris, around, I want to build off something that Alex said, and this could be a really, really hot take, but I feel if AI is living up to its promise, then we should have a better quality of life in 26 and beyond. And it's getting worse. It's getting unrelenting was the word that Alex said. Look, we're losing the plot of the story here.
Yeah.
Like, if AI is supposed to be reaching this new incredible potential, then we should then get our humanity back. We should be able to go on a walk and get some vitamin D and a breath of fresh air and not be glued to our screens. Like that to me is the point. And so if we lose the plot of the story, then I kind of have a hands up moment. I don't really have words other than to say that it's a missed opportunity.
Absolutely.
And I also just want to reinforce when Mark said to reach out to him about that. What I can't even remember what it is you said to reach out. Please make sure that is Mark you're reaching out to, not Alex or Jessica. You can reach out to us about other things, but not that. Okay. That is no bueno on that one. Not a topic.
I think I just opened up a can of DMs.
Good luck with those DMs.
But I do want, it's such a strategic opportunity. I hear people all the time in my network say, I'm so fearful that I'm going to misclassify someone. And I'm like, you trust me, there is a path here and we've got a good setup. And I've seen other organizations with a good setup. So don't let that be a G-rating.
The other thing I would just add, sort of, and this is maybe a selfish plug because it's something I'm doing and I like to do in my career. It's like, I also think what should be working well if employees allow it to happen is to allow employees to really build portfolio careers now, right? Being able to have a full-time job, but also having your side hustles as well. And I think that a lot of times people feel like outside activities could be a conflict of interest, but there are times where they could actually add to your employer brand. Absolutely. So I think that there needs to be more foresight from companies around this, because they tend to be pretty short-sighted around it.
And you can even structure that into total rewards. Like some companies do a good job of supporting people doing, whether it's jobs, but maybe education programs and courses and stuff like that. And it drives a lot more longer term retention that, and so there is hard dollar ROI of doing good as well and being more flexible. Team, I know we have 5 minutes or less. So what are the topics before we do our wrap up? What are the topics that we haven't touched on? Is there anything that you all want to talk about when it comes to 2026 planning, comp planning, headcount planning, tips or advice? Let's be as tactical as we can be for our audience, and then we'll wrap up from there.
One thing that I just think is in the headlines that I just want us to chat about real quick is just the amount of layoffs. Like it just feels, everyone that I'm talking to right now in the personal life and professional, it feels heavy. It feels like every day there's like, 10,000 here and 20,000 there. And like, it just feels that way. And so maybe just us chatting about like, how should people feel about that? And like, what's the bounce back? is there a bounce back? You know what I mean? Like,
I mean, this goes back to the way I look at it is kind of, not to be the Debbie Downer, but kind of like what I said before, like that layoffs like this used to be what people deemed as unprecedented, and now they are the precedent. So, and I think with AI continuing along with whatever else is in our future that we don't know about, I hate to say it, but I think there is going to be a stream of rolling layoffs versus it being the atypical thing that happened in the past. So I think it's more that we have to build more change fatigue in-house, like in expectations and communication with people, because I don't see it being like singular events like they were in the past. I think they're going to be on
your point, like to your earlier point about portfolio, you know what I mean? Like maybe that's where we're headed.
Yeah. I mean, I think if in fact, let's just say we're sort of have a crystal ball and that's our new normal, then we have to have an honest conversation about a reset around the employer-employee relationship, right?
Absolutely.
Because I think we can't have this unrealistic expectation of our employees. And so all the different topics that we've touched on today around whether it be, a side gig or, I'll tell you a quick story about side gig. I actually used that term and I did so intentionally for this, so I could tell this story. Like, it's so interesting because that can be super offensive to people, because they can be equally important. And I remember having a conversation with one of our salespeople, and she had told me when I used the word side gig, she's like, hey, I've got this travel blog and I've got other things that are important to me. I don't see it as a side gig. I see them as equally important. And I think that for me was a real sort of inflection point around the employee-employer relationship. And by the way, this is top performing talent for our organization, right? So I think we have to just start to, if this, again, to Alex's point, if this is the new normal, then we have to rethink that relationship.
Absolutely.
Haris, I'm conscious that we didn't really answer your question. So I'm going to try to answer it if I remember it properly. I think it was like things that people should make sure they're doing before the end of the year. Am I right?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think the couple things I would say are making sure people are documenting, to keep it practical, their decisions and their rationale. Going back to what I was saying about trade-offs, like your future self will thank you for keeping note of it somewhere or using AI for it, whatever it may be. The other thing is my through line about capacity. Have real honest conversations with your executive team about capacity. Like if you're already at 100% and you're adding more priorities in 2026, something has to come off the list, right? And start that conversation now, not in February when somebody's starting to hold you accountable to those new things as well. And then I'd say the last thing is closing the loop with employees, right? Like if you've asked for feedback, tell people what they heard. People hate to wait and not know. And frankly, you won't get participation in the future if people don't do that. So those are the things that I would say.
I would say kind of just rethink your compensation plan. So when we're thinking total rewards, I'm a big proponent of like the salary is one thing, but what else are you going to offer, or that you have made promises that are coming? Can you actually fulfill them? So to Alex's point, be honest about what you can actually do, because it's going to happen. Like people are going to bring it up. I have personally been in situations where I've said something and I said like a date that they would have an update, and they were pinging me on that day. Like they have put it in their calendar. So, learn from my mistakes.
And by the way, we talked about it a little bit earlier when we were talking about cross-functional relationships. I've created like what I call like a retrospective document in the past, which includes that, what worked and why, what didn't work and why, what are we carrying forward, what are we stopping, the stop, start, continue model as well, and open questions that will need to be answered. So I think you don't need to be starting from scratch, like build off stuff.
Yeah, I have just two pieces of advice. I think in Q4 is always a great opportunity to do a couple of things. One, for most people functions, Q1 can be a really, really busy time. So, I know every company does things differently, but, between a reward cycle potentially and all of the compliance reporting that we do, non-discrim testing, get those 5,500 forms, like there's just a lot that goes on. So, we tend to take almost like a frameworks first approach to Q4 so that we have sort of everything in motion, so that all we have to do is refresh the 2025 data to really be prepped and ready to go. And that does help relieve a lot of that tension in Q1 because it is a really busy time. So you can still build all your frameworks for Q4 so you're ready in Q1. And then the second thing that I would say is, if you can use Q4 as your sort of reset timeframe around, okay, what are the practices, and I alluded to this earlier, what are the practices that are just purely outdated, right? That just no longer are fit for purpose, are no longer relevant in today's modern work, that we just do because we've always done them. That is a great place to start to add value in 2026. Because we do a lot of things, like performance management is like a thorn in my side. There's a lot about performance management that is anchored in 30 years, 40 years ago. That just is no longer serving our business stakeholders. We should be accelerating some change management around it and getting, and by the way, I think there would be broad receptivity in most organizations to rework that. Compensation's another space, a lot of very outdated models. And so anything, and by the way, I don't recommend trying to tackle all of that. Just maybe one big outdated thing that you want to change and just do that. Because again, to Alex's point, the change management around that can be significant.
Yeah, and I will just add to that exactly what Mark described is what I do when I start at a new organization or working with a new client. I literally say, like, what is not working, or what have you been saying year after year? This is not serving our best interests. Then stop doing it, because it's the definition of insanity if you're expecting a different result,
On insanity, that's maybe a good place to There we go. There was a lot of amazing advice here. What's worked, what's not worked in 2025, how to rethink and bring things forward in 2026, how to think about AI, the CHRO, CFO relationship, executive relationship, employees, different workforce structures, comp structures, total reward structures. I know we touched on so many different things. This was a very wide and deep conversation. We went from strategy to some really amazing tactical things. So I know Emma's going to have a field day turning this into blog content and quotes and maybe t-shirts and stuff like that. But I really want to thank all of you, Jessica, Alex, and Mark, for coming on this episode and sharing from all your learnings and insights. Thank you so much for being open and transparent with our audience and sharing your nuggets.
Absolutely. This was awesome.
Yeah. Thanks for having us.
Yeah. And by the way, just a request, if t-shirts do come out, please make sure my best side is because not every side is my good side. Just to be clear.
I think we have pictures of you from all sides. So